Hi, this is Rabbi Tzvi Mandel. We're on our third class on Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, basic laws about Passover, Pesach. I have to comment about Nebuch, what happened to Klal Yisrael today, to the Jewish people in Israel, our brothers and sisters. In our land, 5 or 6 people were stabbed by our cousins, Israeli citizens, Arabs, and it's horrible, and we all have to do tshuva and become better. And that point, and the other one to do tshuva, but I have to do tshuva, and we all have to become better Jews and better human beings. I want to tell you something I saw today. So when we opened the Haggadah, it says there was a story, right? Stories are the best. Maisa, there was a story, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Lozman Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, they were sitting in Bnei Brak, and they were speaking about the exodus from Egypt all night until the students came and said, Rebbe, it's time to say the Shema in the morning that Jews say every morning. What was the discrepancy? What was the machlokes between the students and the Rebbes? How did they hold and how did they hold? So the Halachos of Meir Shapiro, the great Rebbe Meir Shapiro, who instituted the now very popular Daf Yomi, he also was the founder and ran the most beautiful yeshiva in Europe, Lublini Yeshiva in Poland. So he says as follows. He says the students, the rabbis, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Lozman Azariah, they held that we're in exile, we're in Galus Nebuch. And so while being in exile, we have to appreciate the exile, meaning that we have to grow from what's going on in exile, as hard as it is. And as the Talmud says, the Gemara says that we're like one sheep among 70 wolves, and hein gruoisav, hein naroisav, that's in French. In English, what it means is that they stopped saying that we say in the beginning of the Amidah, of the Shemona Esrei, Hashem is great and He is awesome and He's strong, but when all Nebuchadnezzar's of Galus, all the horrible things that were going on then in the times of the prophets, so they wanted to stop it, came the Chazal, the scholars, and they said, no, don't stop it. This is the greatness of Hashem. This is the strength of Hashem, that even though we're in such a deep gullis, so deep in this horrible exile with wherever you go today, the anti-Semitism is growing and the horrible, all the negativity, but this is the greatness of Hashem, that we're still around, that the Jewish people are still here, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. And we're so strong, and the nations of the world know this. So these Chazal, they were admiring Hashem and praising Hashem for His greatness in this bitter gullus that we're in. And that's the Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's the exile of the Egypt within the Egypt. Came the students and said, Rebbes, we respect you very much. Rabbi Seinu, you are our Rebbes. But it came the time, Higia Zman Kriyash Moshe Shachris. It came the time to get out of the gullus, to get out of this bitter exile, and the time of mourning, the time M-O-R-N, mourning, the time of light, of joy, of worshiping Hashem out of positivity. So let's really get out of this gullus. And that's what the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim is. That's what the night of Shem Shabbat. We should be in Eretz Yisrael already by then. It's coming Pesach, and today, why put boundaries? We as a Jewish people always believed like the Rambam says in his 13 Principles of Judaism, he doesn't say it about any of the other 13 principles. Just by this one he says, even by the resurrection of the dead, he doesn't say it. Just by Mashiach he says, I will wait impatiently or patiently every day that Mashiach should come today. And the Halachos of Feinstein says in a place that this is how our Babas and our Zaydas were. This is how it was all the years. We believed that today Mashiach is going to come. Baal Shem Tov says we're fools and we believe. Yeah, we are fools. We are fools to Hashem. And we're very proud of being these fools. Okay. Hashem should help. Hashem should protect us wherever we are. Physically, spiritually, emotionally. We are now studying chapter 108. We will finish this chapter today in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. And we'll start with the Kitzur. We'll go over to the other Paiskim. We'll go to the Baal Tanya, and we'll see if Rav Feinstein says anything on the Mishnah Berurah, and Rabbi Braun, who has an interesting comment on this today, on today's, what we're going to learn today. Paragraph 5. On the day the flour has been ground, it is forbidden to be baked. And on the bottom he quotes from the Mishnah Berurah 453. If, however, it was already kneaded is with a K, with water, it may be baked. But special care must be taken that it is not allowed to become chametz. This is done, how do you do that? This is done by speeding up the process and getting it into the oven even quicker than the other matzahs. You have to be very fast in the matzah bakery. Because the flour is then warm, right? On the day the flour had been ground, the flour is already warm and will quickly become chametz when water is poured on it. Therefore, you should postpone using it for at least 24 hours after the grinding. Okay. So on this, the Rav Shulchan Aruch holds, l'chatchila, at best choice, you should wait 2 days in between. If not, then Kitzur said 24 hours. He says if not, you could even be as lenient as only one night, meaning 12 hours. That's how the Kabbalah Tanya holds. So, on one hand, he's more stringent. On one hand, he's more lenient where it's needed. Number 6, the bags for holding the flour preferably should be made new, or at least the seams of the old bags should be opened and they should be washed thoroughly with warm water and ashes, and by rubbing and beating them. That's number 6, paragraph 6. It's best to have them new. That's the mitzvah min hamuvcha where it's possible. That's the most preferred way. But if not, then we open the where it's sewn, we open them up and wash them very well. And as it says over there. Okay, let's just see. 5 and 6 over here, 108, 5 and 6. Okay. According to the Mishnah Berurah 466, at the very least, one must wait overnight, which is the view of the Baal Tanya. It is even recommended to wait if the wheat was ground by hand. Shartzin. Okay. If one did knead with a K-N-E-A-D, the dough on the day that the flour was ground, it may be used. But one must take extra care to knead it and bake it quickly so that it should not become chametz. So he's saying if it has to be done that day, then it should also, everything has to do with speed when it comes to chametz. You mentioned about opening the, undoing the stitching on the used ones if you're going to take used bags. Before laundering the sack, one should also scrape off with a knife any residue that one finds in the area where it was stitched. And then about the ashes, it says that in earlier times, ashes were used as a cleaning agent. Okay, we understand that. Okay, we will go a little bit more. Excuse me, I got a paper cut before, so I put something on and then a Band-Aid. Number 7, and the last paragraph of 108. It is forbidden to load a bag of flour on an animal unless thick leather is placed underneath the bag, as otherwise it will become warm and moist from the perspiration of the animal, in other words. If possible, you should also be careful not to place many bags one on top of the other, because as a result of that, the flour will be heated and become chametz in the kneading. If, however, they were placed one on top of the other, it's necessary to wait at least 24 hours before using the wheat. One should also not sit on the bags of flour. This is from Mishnah Berurah 453. And I think over here, let me see. Okay, there's a nice explanation here from the Mishnah Berurah in 453:34. Shmuel explains there are two concerns over here. The first is that the flour will become warm from the animal's body heat and will therefore become leavened more quickly during kneading, when they start kneading it. K-N-E-A-D, right? As they mentioned before. The second problem is that the animal will perspire due to the weight of its load, and the perspiration may make the flour moist. According to the opinions stating that perspiration can cause leavening like water, the flour can then become chametz. It's according to that view. It's not simple that it can make it chametz. Okay. If one did put the sacks directly on the animal, we do not prohibit it due to this concern, since we follow the opinions stating that perspiration cannot cause the flour to become chametz. There's a leniency here. It is nevertheless recommended to remove the moist flour. Due to the first concern, however, one should wait 24 hours before kneading this flour into dough. Okay, we'll now go to see what the Baal Tanya adds over here, and then we'll see what Rabbi Braun says. Okay, he just says you should wait 1 or 2 days before kneading it, if any of these two cases happen where he put the sack on the animal, or he did one on top of the other. We do a lot of stringencies that don't have to be kept to nth degree, because they're chumras l'kavod Pesach. There are stringencies that we do for Pesach, for matzah, but they don't hold out according to the halacha. They're not strictly halacha, and that's why, as he mentioned, the Mishnah Berurah, there are those that hold that perspiration doesn't make it into chametz. Okay, so Rabbi Bruin says this Shiar Mitzion Halacha, as we mentioned, and Rabbi Bruin quotes from all over. He was an unbelievable genius, knew all over the place. So he quotes a Marsham. The Marsham was the Bajan Rav. He was a big Chassidish Yid. He was a Tzaddik of a Chassid, and he's one of the greatest Paiskim that we have till today. And he, in his 6th volume, Simon Lametes 39, he says as follows: wheat that was ground through a hand grinder, what do they call it? Whatever they call it. And later it was found out that a number of years before they used to grind salt there. So what's the halacha? We know that the Chassam Sofer, the Eilik Chassam Sofer, in his responsa, 127 says that salt that's heated up, it could make something chametz. But still in all, that's when the salt is actually there. We have physical salt. But in this case, it's only because we know that the salt was ingrained into the machine, into the richaim, into the grinding process. Perhaps it was K'dei Klipa. K'dei Klipa is something that we always worry about. It might be enough that it's you could peel it off like you peel off a shell. And there's the view of the Orchos Chaim in Yeridea that says that K'dei Klipa is only a chumrah, a stringency again, but it's not something that could prohibit, especially b'di'evid when it happened already. We don't say it's that stringent. And we also have a halacha in Yeridea 122, Yeridea Simon Kuf Chav Beis, that a davar charif, something that's sharp, like whether it's an onion or whether it's pepper, or in this case it's salt, that was Me'esleis, 24 hours. So that's enough of a leniency. Also, there are those that hold that salt is not considered a davar charav, something sharp. So therefore, this weed is permitted. And he says at the end, it's even good for shmura matzah, for those that take extra stringencies for the night of Pesach matzah. It's good for that also. I want to just quote one more piece over here that we didn't speak about last time. I think it's something very beautiful I mentioned today, Yisrael. And it's like this. We spoke about how you should watch the matzahs. The Torah says you should keep them from becoming chametz. You should protect them from becoming chametz. Just like you have Shomer Shabbos, meaning that you keep the Shabbos and you don't desecrate the Shabbos. You don't go in a car. You're not machal Shabbos. It's called keeping Shabbos. So here there's shmiras hamatzos. Okay. Spoke about the different opinions from when it's cut or later on. Yeah, so Tanya in 453:14 says like this. He just explains this thing. He's always very good at explaining and getting the basis, the fundamental facts of the halacha before you go into studying the halacha. A person does not fulfill his obligation to partake of matzah on the night of the 15th of Nisan, except by eating matzah that a Jew guarded while it was being produced to ensure that it did not become chametz. We spoke about that. Okay. So he has to guard it for the sake of chametz. This concept is derived from the verse and you shall guard the matzahs. That's what we just said, right? It's in Shemos 12. It's interpreted in Psachim 40a. Okay. This is interpreted as meaning that a Jew must guard the matzah throughout the time it is being produced, with the intent, this is the point, that the matzahs be used to observe the mitzvah of eating matzah. The intent has to be, it's going to be used, l'shem matzahs mitzvah, right? It's going to be used for that. Here he says on the bottom, it is sufficient for the person to have in mind that he is guarding the kernels, flour, or dough from becoming chametz. Nevertheless, it has become customary for all those involved in the production of matzah to declare l'shem matzahs mitzvah. If you walked into a matzah factory before Pesach, and all the people are saying there, all the holy Jews, and they're saying l'shem matzahs mitzvah. What does that mean? For the sake of matzah intended for the mitzvah, before beginning to work on the production of the matzahs. Having this intent, when drawing the water to be used for baking of the matzahs also, which we're going to start learning about the water that's being used. It's called mayim shalanim. Also when beginning to knead the matzah dough. Okay, now let's go back here. Some authorities, this is where we're getting. Some authorities maintain that while guarding the matzah, one must have the intent that they be used to fulfill the mitzvah. In the evening you shall eat matzahs, which is in Shemos 12:18. The verse refers to the mitzvah to partake of matzah on the night of the 15th of Nisan. And in Israel it's 2 nights, as we'll see later on. Eating matzah on this night fulfills a positive scriptural commandment. It's one of the biggest mitzvahs that we have. Thus, this opinion maintains that one must produce and bake the matzahs with the intent that they be used at the Seder. That's the point, at the Seder. However, and this is the cute thing, other authorities maintain that one may have the intent to use the matzahs to fulfill the mitzvah. You shall eat matzah for 7 days, which is a different verse in Shemos 12. This is explained in Psachim 128. There is no specific mitzvah to eat matzah on Pesach after the first night of the holiday, or 2 in Gulut by us in the exile. We'll see this later on. Nevertheless, guarding the matzah so that it can be eaten during the holiday can be considered as a task that was performed for the sake of the mitzvah of eating matzah. In other words, if one guarded the matzah as it was being produced for the sake of producing matzah that will be eaten during the 7 days of Pesach, not specifically for the Seder night, a person may fulfill his obligation to partake of matzah on the night of the 15th of Nisan with this matzah. Fundamentally, the halacha follows this view. So it would be nice. We have an interesting thing which we'll learn about later on, that is there a mitzvah to eat matzah the other 6 days of the holiday? Or is it just a mitzvah not to eat chametz? A person has to wash and have a meal, so that's another question. How do you go about washing and eating a meal if you're not going to have any matzah? That's something else. But as far as, is there a mitzvah of matzah all the 7 days? Of course, the way it's interpreted in the Chazal, it would seem only the first night. There's 2 verses. And generally, everybody learns it's only during the Seder that one must eat matzah, the mitzvah of eating matzah, and that's when we make the blessing and everything. But there is a view in the Rishonim, there is a view in the earlier commentaries that learn that it's a mitzvah every day. And later commentaries, there are some that hold like that. And the question is what the Rav Shulchan Aruch holds. So there are words that he says that could be interpreted either way. I once saw a piece of Torah that Lubavitcher Rebbe held that he did not hold that way. So that's what happens when you learn, right? One holds like this, one holds that. As long as we love each other and respect each other, you may have your view. Have a good night.